All right, so we're episode 4 now of the Four Lifters by Lifters podcast, and today we have Jason Arntz, IFBB Pro supplement expert. Are you there yet?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
So I think it'd be a good idea to give people a little bit of your backstory, just because you've been in the industry, both fitness and supplement, for so long.
Yeah, so I started off just as an aspiring athlete. When I was younger in my not preschool but high school days and elementary days, and evolved from the sport of wrestling into football, and steadily progressed into bodybuilding. After high school, I wanted to take the route of bodybuilding, and that's when I really started paying attention to diet, nutrition, supplementation, and what I could do to help benefit my progress, speed up my progress to get to a level that I was. Look, I was always competitive, so whenever I did something, I wanted to try to be the best I could possibly be at it. So, knowing as much as I could about proper nutrition, proper supplementation, I thought that would really aid me in the longevity of the sport and helping me obtain, at that time, the goal I was looking to obtain.
So how old were you when you started?
I started working out with weights probably 15, 16 years old. I actually competed in AAU competition when I was 16 years old, even when I was still wrestling and playing football, just because it did spark an interest in me. But after high school, that's when I really started taking the turn and going in that direction. So I would say from 18 to 19 years old is when I really started getting my hooks into the sport and learning as much as I can about the body, how the body assimilates things, how things are utilized, and what nutrients to take in properly to be effective at recovery and performance.
So how old were you when you first competed?
So, like I said, 16 at an AAU competition was more just like to try it out. But when I was 19 years old, I competed, won the Teenage Mr. New Jersey, and I won the Teenage Philadelphia Muscle Mania competition.
Okay.
And then I just kept going.
So when you turned pro, how old were you there?
So at 20 years old, my first year entering into not the teenage division, the men's division, I competed, and I was looking to get a national qualification. So I believe at 21, I was a middleweight. I won the NPC East Coast competition, and then the following year I entered my first national level competition. I believe I was 23 at the Junior USA, took third, went back the next year, 24 years old, did the Junior Nationals, took second, did the Nationals that year, and kept going back and forth from the Nationals to the USA. 26, I got my pro card, but at 25, I won the light heavyweight division of the USA. Came back as a heavyweight in 1998. I was 26 years old. Won the USA again as a heavyweight, and then I went off to the Nationals and won the heavyweight class in the overall there to get my pro card.
So you've seen kind of the two generations of bodybuilding, right? Is a lot of people talk about 90s bodybuilding,
Yeah.
and then what we have today. So you competed in both, right?
Right. So late 90s, early 2000s, that's what people talk about nowadays. They feel as if that was the golden era. I know they've used that term in the past.
Yeah.
But it was really the hardcore era. It was the evolution of bodybuilding from one generation to the next, and the level of physique. And in the early Arnold days, there wasn't much science, not to use the term science-backed stuff, because a lot of it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
But the trial and error had progressed at such a rate that you were really starting to see a significant difference in the physiques. From a chemical side of view, from a nutrition side of view, from a training side of view, all the philosophies changed. But the work ethic, that is, I guess, the one common denominator that transitions from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s and the early 2000s of those generations of bodybuilders. That always stayed the same. And then something kind of happened, after that.
But it can't be just work ethic, right? Like, you can't say that Phil Heath doesn't work hard. and like your
Well,
top
I'm
level
not really
guys.
even applying to Phil Heath. I'm applying to the generations a little bit younger than him that are trying to
I
obtain their
see.
pro status and get to a national level.
So you're talking about like the 20-year-olds of today, for
Yeah,
the most part.
yeah. It's just and you know maybe it's not their fault. Maybe the sport did drop. You know, it dropped in popularity, and I think that came from the physiques becoming a little too overwhelming and a little too distorted, where it got to the point where, I had more of a classic physique. I was only 5'5", and I was a heavyweight, which I packed a lot of size for my frame, but I only competed at 204, 205 pounds in my heaviest.
Right.
But I still had a classical look, small waistline, wide shoulders, sweeping thighs, and that look kind of changed with abuse of certain chemicals, and it kind of morphed into something that was really unobtainable, and I think people realized that, and tickets weren't selling. So it started, that kind of, it lost a good generation of athletes due to the fact that athletes weren't making money. You have to earn a living. Most people are into their prime in bodybuilding till their mid-30s.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're trying to support a family, or you're on your own, and you're not paying your bills. We all have to grow up, sooner or later. So it's either get a job or try to find a way to make money. And the sport wasn't providing beneficial ways for the athletes to make money, so it seemed like that kind of just dropped off.
So what about like like training attitude? How would you describe it from the 90s and early 2000s to now?
Okay, so it was work hard first. Everything was work hard, get your diet in, get your food in, get your nutrition in, get your chemicals in, but that was all secondary. The one constant, the one control was you were busting your ass every day, no matter what. And everything else was utilized to help catapult you. But without that hard work, without that drive and grunting it out in the gym, your physique wasn't going to change. I think in the recent years that kind of lost a little bit of its luster, where, maybe people were afraid of getting injured. Maybe it's more of a different style of time under tension instead of intensity, for contraction, or intensity to break down the cells to help them rebuild. It just seemed like more was relied on the chemical side of things. And it was a different chemical side of things. They started doing things like almost in a designer kind of way. Like, hey, let's put this together and let's put this together. Like supplements, let's just throw this on the wall and see what sticks. And a lot of it doesn't stick very much. And it could have a negative effect on a physique and a negative effect on progress. But I think the basic fundamentals were lost in the recent generation.
From like a training standpoint, though, do you think when you go into the gym, or at least when you went into the gym when you were actively competing, you took like a performance aspect to your training?
Absolutely.
So you still like thought of yourself as like an athlete while you were training?
Absolutely. I was preparing for my workout as soon as I finished the one the day before. And everything I did that day was to get me ready and prepare for the next day training session. If something hurt, I would try to rehab it overnight. If I tweak things or this and that, make sure I was on point. Make sure like my food was in. Make sure my meals were in. Make sure I was prepared. I was up on time. I'm an early morning trainer, so I always felt like your hormone levels are higher in the morning. Plus I was always working. I was one of those guys that. I was a pro bodybuilder, but I had a full-time job and I had different, investments at the time and things going on because bodybuilding wasn't paying the bills, but it was, it was in my heart. It was what I loved to do. I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the sport of it and the performance aspect of it and the fact that I just love competing.
Do you think like machines and stuff kind of take away from that?
It's funny you should say that because there's been so much back and forth on machines versus free weights. And, and I can honestly say that, I used to say that, there's no difference. Your muscle cells don't know the difference if you're pushing a machine or pushing a free weight. However, now that I'm retired, okay, and I've been, not that I'm doing solely, all machines, but I've backed off a lot of the free weights and the power movements and the compound movements and the heavy powerlifting and the heavy squatting and deadlifting and stuff like that, because I don't really need to risk injury. But during this quarantine, I've been working out at home. I now have a home gym. I can actually see a difference going back because I'm limited. There's only so much I could do, in my garage. So I am limited. So there's been a different, consistency to my muscle shape and look using more free weights now. So it definitely plays a role.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kevin Levrone said on RX Muscle, he said one of the biggest things that had to do with the three-dimensional look of their era was they didn't have, he quoted hammer strength.
Yeah.
He said they probably had a lot more pec tears and,
Yeah.
body problems,
Yeah.
but ultimately they looked better because of it.
Yeah.
So you think that's...
I would definitely, I would have argued that in the past, but now I would agree with that.
So if you were to set up a workout, let's say a leg day, can you walk us through that?
For my competing days?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so leg day it wasn't a day at the beach, so we'd start off warming up, stretching hamstrings, stretching our quads out.
So you stretch before you work out?
Always, yeah.
So that's like a no-no now, right?
Not with me. No,
a lot of people say that stretching prior to working out can cause more damage and reduction in strength. No, so
I believe that you've heard that.
But this is why we have you here.
I believe that you've heard that. Why?
I don't know if it's
tell any Olympic track athlete, don't stretch before you go on a sprint.
Well, I think I guess I'm referring to static, whereas they're looking at more dynamic warm-ups. But that's kind of
But even so,
yeah.
Look at box jumpers. Look at football players. Look at wrestlers who it's all explosive movements.
Yeah, I guess their warm-ups. I guess what people are referring to in risk of injury is static stretching. So where you're just holding your toes and just doing that versus like a more dynamic, like a walking lunge or something would be more of a dynamic warm-up.
Okay, so I have two avenues, with that. One is I always was taught, and I've always applied, you never want to train hard a cold muscle or a muscle that doesn't have blood in it, because then you're risking injury. Your tendons aren't warmed up, your ligaments aren't warmed up, and if you go into lifting heavy poundage without stretching and warming up, you're really throwing caution into the wind. Aside from that, the look that we were just talking about, the look I had, or the Kevin Levrone look, or the Flex Wheeler look, the Sean Ray's look, those are the guys that were in my generation. Those are the guys that I aspired, to when I was training. They had athletic looks. They looked like they could run on the beach. That you saw them walking down the street. They weren't some blocky, rock thing, but my point is, for my training, I always wanted to maintain mobility. Okay. I was a wrestler. I was a football player. I was fast. I always wanted to have that athletic look on stage because I always thought it looked a little more graceful. I always thought it was a little more appealing to the people in the audience, the people that were buying the magazines or going on media outlets looking to emulate somebody or looking to see a physique that they want to aspire to. To me, and I know other guys that like the opposite, like those big men. Oh, I want to look like that, but that wasn't my style, But in terms of stretching, I don't know how stretching would damage a muscle unless you're abusing a stretch or stretching improperly. But training is a form of exercise, just like anything else, and you don't want to get under a bench press, without fully, warming up your rotator cuffs and warming up your supraspinatus and warming up your biceps and your shoulder, every part of it. You need to be prepared for that lift. But you give anybody enough time, they're going to find a problem with anything,
I think
I think sometimes people just need to create things to argue about. Like I've heard things about carbohydrates and proteins and fats, and it's just stuff that, like, where are you? Come on, like everybody's trying to recreate the wheel.
Well, that's how you get paid,
right?
Right? You confuse the people that are listening enough to pay you for your advice.
Everybody, please stretch. It'll avoid injury. Make sure you're doing your stretching, and you'll have more longevity in the sport.
All right. So after you stretch for leg day.
Okay. I forgot how we even got on that. Okay. So I'd stretch for leg day. I would go into, depending on the season, but I always liked doing leg extensions first, just to warm up the knees, warm up your quads.
Are you going heavy or?
Well, the first 3 sets are basically just warm ups to get some blood in there, but then I would do 2 heavy drop sets beyond failure.
Okay.
So I would start off with probably something I can only complete 7 or 8 full repetitions on, and then I would do get to the point where I can only extend 3/4 of the way, only extend 1/4 of the way. When you get to the point where you're only extending 1/4 of the way, I would have my spotter assist me with 2 forced reps.
Okay.
I would then drop the weight 35%, and I would do it again until total failure, get 2 forced reps, drop it another 35%, and blow it out that way to the point where you can't move it, and 2 forced reps. So that was beyond failure training that was popular in our days. It's hard, it's intense, you have to have heart, but it pre-exhausts the muscle. So you get enough blood in there, 2 working sets of that, and then I would go over to do hack squats.
Okay.
Hack squats I would gradually increase. It was 5 sets of hack squats, starting with 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plates, 4 plates, and sometimes up to 5 or 6 plates, depending on how I felt that day. After hack squats, I would go over to leg press, and I would do 3 or 4 sets of leg press with a drop set on that. Just go into failure and drop in 2 or 3 plates.
When you say 3 or 4 sets, you're talking about increasing weight over time, or 3 or 4 sets
so
at the same top weight?
Okay, so at that point, you are pretty warmed up. But I would start, I think I used to use 11, 12 plates, maybe more, at the time. I would never go right into that. I'd probably start off with 8, 10, and then 12.
But you're counting those 8, 10, 12 as your working sets?
Yeah,
Okay.
So with 8 plates on each side, I would get 12 to 15 reps. Next set, I would do 10 plates on each side,
Okay.
10 to 12 reps. And the final set with 12 plates on each side, I'd probably get 6 or 7, and then I would drop 3 or 4, do another 6 or 7, drop 3 or 4, do another 6 or 7. From there, we went into walking lunges. 3 sets. Now that's to really just stretch out the thigh, good, athletic type lunges, not just banging your knee on the floor and like good form, good technique. Lunges I thought were very important because it provided good shape and separation to the front part of the thigh. So 3 sets of that, and by that point you're dead, but I would always like to finish with squats. I'd do 2, 3 sets of regular barbell squats. I would go 3, 4, and maybe 5 plates on each side. No forced reps on those. By the time you're just really blowing things out, but that was a full quad day.
Okay.
And if you didn't throw up halfway through, then you were doing something wrong.
Did you tend to do heavy free weight movements at the end?
Yeah, so later on in my career, I particularly paid more attention to that to avoid injury. I always wanted to pre-exhaust. I didn't want to squat 7 plates, so
Right.
5 was enough. Even though 5 is still a ton of weight, 5's a lot of weight. But at the time, I probably could have done a lot more, but I didn't want to do a lot more, and I didn't think it was conducive, with disc issues, spine issues, stuff like that, neck issues.
Right.
It's a lot of weight to put on your neck, and guys that have been doing it for years, they know, and they're suffering probably the same way I suffer nowadays, too, with little tweaks and injuries that you carry around from doing, stupid shit like that for years.
Yeah, it's a lot of heavy weight over a lot of years.
Over a lot of years.
Yeah.
So that was a typical leg day.
Okay. And you would follow the same general protocol for each body part?
I mean, more or less. Hack squats, I would kind of alternate with front squats, and I would always keep my feet right next to each other because I wanted it to build the belly, the sweet part of the thighs, to give them more dominance. I was always broad, wide shoulders, so I always tried to match that with my thigh width. So if it wasn't hack squats one workout, it was front squats. If it wasn't one leg press, it might have been a different leg press, like a Nebula or an Icarian or one of the Cybex ones that comes a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't leg press, we might have done an inverted leg press or something along those lines.
But the general concept of like rep scheme and intensity kind of stayed the same?
Yeah, pretty much that always stayed in place. That was pretty much a constant. The beyond failure training, I would back off of that a little bit the closer I got to competition. As my body fat decreased, and you're on a calorie restricted diet, you don't want to, your immune system's compromised. You can't train that heavy. And anything that's that demanding plays such a toll on your central nervous system that you do need a break. So doing that every other workout with the beyond failure, or cutting it out 5 or 6 weeks before a show. Because at that point, you're not trying to build muscle, you're trying to maintain.
Right.
And it's more about the fat burning process and keeping what you have at that point, keeping fullness.
So let's say you didn't have a show coming up and you're training pretty hard. You're just enjoying it. We'll say you're at like a maintenance level. Like, what are you doing with your diet to go with the training? Like, are you eating for recovery, or how's that pair together?
Okay, so yeah, there was always a plan in place. So in my off season, I ate clean. I would have a cheat meal every couple days, but I wouldn't count carbs. I didn't count fat. If I was getting out of shape, I would pay a little more attention to that, but I had a faster metabolism, and I would really have to systematic. I didn't blow up after each show. Like, I gradually started putting, I know guys that gained 30, 40 pounds, within a week or two after a show, and it just, to me, that wasn't healthy, and it just wasn't conducive to the look that I wanted, so I always tried to maintain and just grow from there. So I would slowly increase calories, but I had a set point on protein. This is the protein I want to take in each day in my off season. I'm getting some of the fats from the red meats. I'm getting some of the fats from the sources of chicken I'm getting, whether it's whole eggs or egg whites. But carbohydrates, I always felt is not that they were non-essential, but there was a timing for them, and I used that when I would diet also. And I mentioned that in the Instagram interview of diets that I'm about to do. Like, I always felt as if carbohydrates were, borderline non-essential. There's a timing for them, and we do need them, but to overload on them, it's a stress on your system. It distends your stomach. It's extra calories. Carbohydrates can get converted to body fat much faster than fat can. So you have to pay particular attention to when you're eating them, the sources, and how much you're taking in. Fats, I like to keep the healthy fats in. That's why if I was going heavier with fats, it would be a little less carbohydrates. But I wouldn't eat fats and carbs together because your body can't utilize two different energy sources at the same time. So most likely would be the carbs earlier in the day, and I would cut off that to maintain glycogen and spare glycogen breakdown. I would increase the calories from fat at night so my body had something to utilize and burn throughout the night.
But that's because you were training in the morning.
That's
right?
because I was training in the morning.
It would be flipped if you
well,
were
that's why I
training
said
at night.
timing of things was always crucial for me and anybody else. If they're training at a different time, I recommend starting off with a slower release carbohydrate throughout the day, having some post carbohydrates to recover and replenish glycogen.
Like a dextrose or something.
Dextrose is more just like a table sugar. I love the Carb 10, and the cluster dextrin I'm not opposed to. I used to use it, but I like the Carb 10 for intra workout, and the cluster dextrin I would probably put post workout with a banana, and maybe like a light carbohydrate meal after that. And if you're having another meal, like a 6th or 7th meal, just pretty much a protein and fat meal.
How did you know how much to eat if you weren't counting macros back then?
So it went on a protein based. It wasn't like I wasn't really counting macros. I had an idea. Like here's let's just say 350 grams of protein that I'm taking in a day. And let's just say that attributes to 1,800 calories with the fat that's in the protein. Aside from that, I would try to get at least 4,000 calories. So my carbohydrates ranged probably to 200 to 250 grams on training days. On non-training days, it was less. And my fats were probably, off the top of my head, maybe 100, 120 grams.
Okay, so you kept protein consistent, but your calories would change based on the day?
It would based on the day, based on my output, because your bodies are constantly different, And I never really wanted to become stagnant. I always like kind of not switching things up, but on off days, I didn't really need to take in as many calories because my output was different, on my recoveries days and then on my training performance days.
So if you have like an all-out leg session that you just described, you're not changing your diet at all?
Okay, so on days like that, my protein sources are the same. My pre-workout meals are the same. My intra-workout meals are the same. But I would always have my leg workout at the end of the week, primarily on a Friday or a Saturday, and that was the day that I always had one of my cheat meals just to get some extra calories in.
So you're a fan of having a cheat meal on a day that you're training and not an off day to use the glycogen source for the next day?
Well, that's the thing is, your body always absorbs nutrients, whether they're good nutrients or not, if it needs them when you're in recovery. Mm-hmm. So if you're sitting around doing nothing, I'm not saying you're not still recovering from the day prior, but there's a slight little advantage of when you finish, training, especially a session like that your body's going to utilize those nutrients a little more efficiently.
What would be your go-to cheat meal?
I would go to Burger King and get a double Whopper with cheese and fries and still a Diet Coke. I wasn't a big sugar guy. I was more like a burger or some pizza. Every once in a while I'd have a dessert, but it was one meal.
Yeah, people always. When I was in college, I used to compete in the 220 and 198 weight class. I wanted to be a 220. I just never was able to fill out the weight class. And I used to, after training, I used to go to McDonald's and get 2 doubles, 2 large fries,
Yeah.
2 Dr. Peppers, and then I would walk home and I would eat the entire thing on my way home.
Right.
And I got home, I would take a shower and I would eat again. But I think people, I think they overdo the fast food thing, but I also feel like they could use it every once in a while as well, depending on the personality type.
Yeah, see, now they've, just like you said, everybody has to recreate the wheel, and now they have refeed days, and they what the fuck is a refeed? Is this PG-13 or we?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
Right, so, I somebody said this to me, like, what the fuck are you talking about, a refeed day? You're constantly feeding. What do you mean a refeed day? Yeah. And they have these days where they just eat shit all day. And to me, the only reason I would have the cheat meal, and I would do it later on at night, because I always felt post-workout, look, you're not going to get, you need quality protein. You're not going to get the same quality protein from a piece of fried chicken or a burger from Burger King, than you would a 10-ounce steak or a 10-ounce piece of chicken or fish. Yeah. It's just better quality. So I would take my quality in when I needed it, and then at the end of the day, when I was backing off my carbs, I would have the high-fat meal. So it didn't affect me as much as it normally would somebody from a fat retention point of view. But also, when you have a heavy meal like that, I was full for hours. I didn't want it. So if I had it earlier in the day, it kind of always, and I did this from trial and error, it would always screw me up. Like I wasn't hungry my next meal. It's hard enough getting these calories in to have to force feed yourself when you don't want to eat dry food, as opposed to you just ate a Big Mac or a double Whopper, which goes down in a second,
I would always sleep like a baby too.
Right.
Like, I would have the best sleep of my life if I ate a junk meal after a hard training session.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's heavy on your system. It takes a while to digest. You get an insulin release, which could bring you down a little bit. But most likely, it's just, even still now, I have a couple slices of pizza and I'm in trouble. I've become sensitive to certain foods. Yeah. In my later years.
You talked on Instagram about kind of like cycling protein sources.
Yeah.
Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I started off, I was heavy. When I was learning what to do and what not to do, I always thought red meat was the best source, and I would eat it 5-6 times a day. And I was at a young enough age where I could get away with that. Right. Then it got to the point where every protein source has a different amino acid structure. So let me just try to get a different amino acid structure from something different. And plus, I was getting sick of eating red meat 5-6 times a day. So I would have some chicken. I didn't use a lot of fish. Fish I kind of saved primarily for contest time. I eat it now, but when I was, in my mode, I would save it primarily for contest time, because it's something that's soft, it's easy to digest, it doesn't take a toll on your system, and it's leaner. It's depending on the kind of fish it is, but it's a leaner source than a red meat or most chickens. But I got to the point where I enjoy just having a variety of different foods. So it would be an egg white, a couple yolks, with that, source. I would have a red meat source. I would have a chicken source. I'd have a fish source. And when whey protein became popular, I started incorporating a couple of shakes a day. Most likely, first thing in the morning before I trained and post workout, for just to get it right in me, because it's fast absorbing and pre-digested.
But you always counted the whey protein towards your protein goal?
Yeah, they were still, you're talking 60 grams of whey protein with 50 grams of either, a carb 10 or a cluster dextrin with a banana. So you're talking 70 grams of protein there, 60 grams of protein. So you're still talking a 400 calorie shake. It's still a meal, but the good thing about that is that it gave your digestive system a break. All those heavy meals. I thought shakes became beneficial just because you're trying to recover from training.
Right.
The last thing you need to do is spend time on your digestive system recovering and breaking down certain foods. Like, I wanted all my energy, all my recovery energy to go towards my muscle cells, and having those heavy meals in me, I always felt like took away.
What about like other food sources though? Were you a big greens guy?
So I was in my off season, I was more a broccoli guy and salad guy. Okay. Pre-competition, I would pay more attention to greens, but I really utilize them for the digestive role, the fiber in the broccoli. I would have broccoli with almost every meal, except my shake meals, obviously. But yeah, I was well balanced. I think I did it pretty proper.
When you would get into contest prep, would you essentially eliminate carbohydrates and fats, like
Okay.
as you got into the showtime?
Okay, so I could say that every contest prep has always been slightly different. Your body's always different. Your body's always evolving. So you're never going to prepare for a competition the same way twice. My protein sources and my protein amounts would always primarily be the same based upon my weight at that time. Okay. Carbohydrates, I would actually cut them down first, and I would keep my fats to a minimum. And I would slowly decrease my carbohydrates until I got my body fat to a certain level. And at that point, based upon how my body would react to the foods, and every time is different, I would either increase my carbohydrates or keep the carbs down and increase my fats. Sometimes I would even increase my protein just to get the calorie structure the same.
Were you doing this all yourself?
Yeah.
You never had a coach?
Never had a coach. Self-taught on everything. Self-taught on nutrition. Self-taught on supplementation. You know, I learned at an early age, so I had a better understanding of things kind of coming into it. So there was these coaches. I came from Diamond Gym, which at the time was the mecca, you know, on the East Coast, you know, for pro bodybuilders and aspiring athletes and stuff like that. So I would talk to guys, and they would come to me and ask me for advice, and I would talk to them about what they were doing, and well, this doesn't really make sense. And why don't you try it this way? And then it just started where people just came to me, and you know, through that time, and the more I competed and the more I sought to go after whatever, the more I learned. I always thought there was so much power in knowledge. You know, I hate to use the cliche, power in knowledge, but it's true. I've trained other pro athletes. I've trained other top amateur athletes. I've helped them get their pro cards and, you know, win pro competitions. You know, so yeah, everything is self-taught. There's a rhyme and reason for everything. I did talk to a couple coaches at the time, and just to get their ideas on things. And I feel as if, and this is something I could say to anybody working with a trainer, anybody working with a coach, you know, if something doesn't make sense, always ask why. There has to be a reason why you're doing everything. And I asked a guy once, you know, why, and I don't want to, you know, but I asked somebody, and this was somebody who was training top people, you know, and doing pretty well. I asked him why he took this approach. And he said, I don't know. I just always done it. It just made sense. I said, well, how does it make sense? And he gave me a philosophy. And it didn't make sense. Yeah. It was just something that he said he always did. And I did the complete opposite. So, but look, you know, he did well with what he had. And you know, there's a million ways to cross the road, you know.
Yeah. I said on an earlier podcast that I've never been coached for powerlifting.
Right.
And but I've coached, you know, our entire team. I was the team coach.
So you get it.
But there's just a certain amount of knowledge that you get when you force yourself to try to be the best on your own. Right? Because you have to micromanage everything. You have to figure out what actually matters, what doesn't. Right. And, you know, in powerlifting, really only two things matter. As many calories as you can get in as you're a performance athlete, and sleep. Right. And I feel like sleep is something that's definitely undermanaged in today's role. I don't know if it was like the Dana Lynn Bailey kick, where it was like, you know, no sleep, and they advertised that.
That's the thing. That's the new you know, shiny toy. You know, no days off.
Yeah.
And let's do like what do you mean no? I'm not religious. Okay, I'm not religious by any means. But even Jesus had a day off. Like, what are you saying? You're more powerful than Jesus? Like, you know, like, so but you're right. It's just what shiny new toy looks good to sell at this time. But for me, and even with my products that I create, everything is about performance and recovery. And there's always some new shiny toy that comes out that's science-backed and has this data on it. And there's a lot of them that I've tried. Okay, they're good. But you tell me one champion athlete that I got where I was because I was using this. No, they're using this, you know. And everything looks good on paper, right?
Well, my favorite's the clinical dosing.
Oh, my God, dude.
So you ran a clinic on one dose, and that's the clinical dosing that you came up with.
Okay, so here, right. So I did an analogy on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and it's the same philosophy. Okay, so acetaminophen, okay, you know, Tylenol, 500 milligrams. That's the clinical dose based upon body weight. You need to take one capsule. And I'm just throwing these numbers out here just for hypothetical, just to make a point. Okay. You need to take 1 or 2 tablets based upon your body weight, based upon your age, but to reduce fever, pain, headaches, any type of association with any of those ailments. You take a Tylenol. And then there was another one that came out before that you had aspirin, pain relieving, analgesic, okay? 375 milligrams per aspirin. You need to take 1 a day. for pain-reducing effects, for anti-inflammatory, fever, whatever. Those were the clinical studies. This is what they do. But then somebody came up with an idea. Okay, somebody came up with an idea. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 65 milligrams of aspirin, because aspirin at high doses, not only can it tear the lining of your stomach, but it could cause other digestive issues, and it's toxic at certain levels. Acetaminophen is very toxic at certain levels. So you want to avoid those heavy compounds because of toxicity levels. So this guy came up with an idea. I'm going to have 65 milligrams of aspirin. Much more tolerable to the digestive system, much easier on the stomach. I'm going to give you, I think it's 200 milligrams of acetaminophen instead of the 500 milligram dose. And I'm going to mix in there 65 milligrams of caffeine. Everybody thought this guy was fucking crazy. You know what that made? Excedrin. One of the best pain-reducing, fever-reducing, analgesics, over-the-counter medicines that you could buy at the time. But based upon the clinical studies, like they thought, oh, we're not going to compete with this guy. We're going to blow him out of the water. Like, people don't realize the synergistic effects of things. And look, just because you have a clinical dose of 6,000 milligrams of citrulline, first of all, it doesn't mean your body's assimilating 6,000 milligrams of citrulline. And besides, if you're on a proper diet, you don't need the 6,000 milligrams of citrulline. Just like glycerol, if you're on a heavy carbohydrate-based diet, glycerol might not work for you because your glycogen storages are always full. If you're on a reduced carbohydrate diet, you might feel glycerol more than anybody. But you need to create a synergistic blend that has something in there, different pathways to deliver blood, for blood flow, hydration, etc., whatever you're looking to come up with. But yeah, clinical doses have really, and it's really more for the Monday morning quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
There's just a lot of that. For me, I didn't care what a clinical dose. This is what I took. If it wasn't enough, I took more. If I didn't need as much, and I was a less is more kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I never noticed a difference between 4,000 milligrams of citrulline or anything over that. I've done 8. Like, what the fuck? I'm fucking wasting money. I'm just pissing money away.
Yeah, I think it just what it's done is
and body weight goes into that. Like, these 150-pound guys, you need 6,000 grams of, dude, I don't know who you're talking to. But even aside from that, look, if you're not training hard and you're not eating right, you could have all the 6,000 milligram citrulline doses you want. You're not going to become a champion athlete.
Yeah, it's created like blanket. It's created like blanket products for the industry too, right? So you see a pre-workout has 6 grams of citrulline, might have a gram of agmatine, 350 milligrams of caffeine,
right.
And it's just like it's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But if you were to like rip the label off of every pre-workout and with a whole bunch of different formulas, I bet you
nobody would know the difference.
Well, for those, yes. For our store, we have almost 70 different pre-workouts, right. And they legitimately have different formulas.
Right.
If somebody were to try every one of those pre-workouts, what you'd probably find is the ones that you would least expect to be great are probably the ones that would affect you the most.
Yeah.
But you're just not going to be prone to the marketing and the crazy flavor that's on the bottle.
Not shiny new toy.
Yeah.
Shiny new toy. It's like on my pump product. I know we've talked about this in the past, but I have 7 different components in there. None of them are clinically dosed, except for my pine bark extract, which at the time nobody was using. The mentoflavone, which I use, and only one other guy was using at that point. But it creates a good synergistic effect. And I had 1,000 mg of lion's mane in there, which gives you that good mental focus and clarity. But it's those are the things that people are going to buy. Whatever's just like you said, whatever's flashy, whatever looks good. But the true athletes, they're going to take what works. And that's my market.
When I was younger, I never really switched up like supplements.
Me neither.
I always took the same thing. If I knew it worked and I could digest it.
Leucine.
Yeah, that's what I would take.
I know there's a huge argument on glutamine, but I'm a big glutamine believer. It does have rebuilding cells, but for digestive issues, especially guys that are eating the way they do, immune system, enhancements.
I think people were getting sued because they were marketing it as
a pure muscle builder,
as a muscle recovery or muscle builder, and they had to take that off their labels, and now they don't advertise it as anything, and they let you make that decision.
Well, it's been around for years. It's not going anywhere. The reason there's such a huge market for it because people do like it. They take it and they feel something from it. Whether it's not an immediate reaction, but they do feel. There was only a gram of it in that Airborne product. or maybe even 500 milligrams. I'm not even sure, but people felt it worked. They felt it helped their immune system. That's what you have to play into. What do people feel? What works? What have you used that works? And that's what I try to push to my market.
So if you're building a supplement stack for yourself in 2020, what are you throwing in there?
So I have my performance pre-workouts. I have a high stim one, the Rogue, you sell at the store. I have my pump product, the Forge, which I like stacking. On some days, I've kind of not backed off completely, but I've lowered the stims. But I've always been the first product I ever created was my Rehab. Obviously, I didn't create that 20 years ago when I was using it.
Right.
I've systematically increased the compounds, the raw ingredients to have what I have today. I wish I had what I had back then.
They didn't have those.
I used to use Gatorade as a carbohydrate source, but the basic fundamentals and principles of why I thought this product worked were there, and they're still there. And I think it's probably one of the most underrated products in the industry around intra workouts. That's when your body is breaking down. That's when your cells are tearing. You're doing damage. That's when they absorb the nutrients the most. It spares protein breakdown. It replenishes glycogen, hydrates you, complete amino acid profile. It's a solid product. But I would always have my intra workout. That's been a constant with me for as long as I've been doing this. Post workout, it's a whey isolate shake with some good fast digesting carbohydrates.
So just to cut you off there, even if you're taking carbohydrates intra, you feel that your body still needs them post as well?
Okay, so because I wasn't a huge carbohydrate guy, the timing of carbohydrates I always felt were best suited during your workout, slow release before, okay, just to get your blood sugar to a certain level, because weight training is anaerobic activity. So your body starts burning sugar right away. Once your sugar level gets to a certain point, you start breaking down protein tissue because it's anaerobic activity. So if you're eating a small amount of carbs before your workout, you're pretty much at that level where you're going to start tapping into protein for an energy source. So an intra workout with a medium amount of carbohydrates I thought was very conducive. And then you want to replenish them post workout, and I would back off them for the rest of the day. Okay. So that was my timing of carbohydrates, intra workout and post workout.
Okay. And I've always felt personally that if I take a post workout shake with a simple carb, I feel really good. Like I feel almost rejuvenated.
Yeah.
But if I take an intra and a post, maybe because our muscle amounts are a lot different, but I always felt like I didn't get that rejuvenating effect when I took my post workout.
So you might have been craving it more post because you didn't have it intra. So you're replenishing. But to my argument, in my product, there's only 12 grams of carb 10. It's not a lot of carbohydrates. Depending on body weight, I recommend a scoop and a half for guys over 200 pounds. Okay. So they're getting a little under 20 grams of the carb 10. Now the carb 10 is a very fast digesting, low glycemic carbohydrate, so there's no insulin spike. It kind of goes right into the cells for glycogen. So you are utilizing that. So if you did an intra, maybe a cluster dextrin or something like that does release hydrochloric acid to break down, which carb 10 doesn't. You do get an insulin spike. It weighs on you a little bit longer, so I could see why you're not getting that effect. But with the carb 10, I would think that you would still get that effect. Okay. And to my point, that's just really to prevent you from breaking down protein during your training. It's not going to fill you back up.
Right.
It's going to give you some glycogen to continue on your movements, to use as energy, spare the protein, where at the time, the essential amino acids you're taking in could actually be used for recovery instead of being burnt as fuel.
Okay. So intra, post, very important for you. Pre-workout, sounds like you can...
Small amounts, slow release carbohydrates.
Are you a big amino guy?
I am. So in my time, they only had branch chains, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. It's not a complete protein. So I used to have to go out and buy the other essentials and put them together to make my own food. They didn't have it. But the thing is, people do what they're told. People believe what they read, and unfortunately, that's the society we live in. I just like you, I took it a step further. This doesn't make sense to me. So, hey, this is what I'm going to do. But it worked, and I felt it. My aminos I have now, I have them throughout the day. I'll add them in my water. I drink a lot of water. I'm probably a 2-gallon-a-day water guy. So at times, you want a little flavor, but I have a good amino product, 12 grams. It's not a heavy overload. The flavoring's good, so it kind of helps get the water down. But I'm not eating as much protein as I used to anymore. I don't need to. So that little extra bit of recovery helps. And it's a little with B vitamins. I feel more hydrated afterwards.
Okay. Anything else that you would throw in? I know you said glutamine too.
So the glutamine I throw in also, but that's in my Intra. I actually have that and extra leucine in my Intra with ornithine. And I have a GDA in my Intra, the pterostilbene. It's an antioxidant, so that helps shuttle the nutrients into your cells so you feel replenished during your workout. I like my sleep product. I know you do well with it.
Yeah,
You know, it's just...
we're actually sold out right now.
Okay, so yeah. So I was a big GHB guy. Okay, in my time, it was legal.
Yeah.
Okay, they used to sell it at Vitamin Shop. They used to have it in liquid form, but I had guys that I was getting it from that had it in powder form. It was a little more potent and concentrated. It wasn't diluted in the solution. But, you know, I'm an early morning guy, and I was working up until late at night, so I'm only sleeping 5-6 hours. I would take GHB, I'd fall asleep for the night, and I'm waking up ready to go. So when I created my sleep product, and just like you said, I think it's one of the other underestimated products in the industry. Just like you said, no sleep, no rest, you know, no days off, like who are you kidding, dude? Like, what do you think? What do you think's happening to your body? Your central nervous system is going to shut down. Your body starts burning protein as an energy source because your body goes into survival mode. You're not supposed to be up 20 hours a day.
It's a sick loop too. Is the less they sleep, the more caffeine they need.
The more caffeine, the more stimulants, the more stress on the central nerve. So their recovery is horrible. Yeah. I've had great feedback from customers in your store, my customers across the country, guys with post-traumatic shock stress disorder that can't sleep, but because of the heavy dose of GABA, these guys were having crazy nightmares. He said that he used his mind with the heavy dose of GABA and it lowers his brain activity. He could sleep without having nightmares where he feels like he's back in the war doing some stuff that, you know, weighs on him heavily. Like, I've had testimonials from guys and people putting on my blogs on the web. It's a solid product. But when I created that product, you know, like for every ingredient in any one of my products, there's a specific purpose. It's there. You know, I don't care if this is this new patented trademarked ingredient with a clinical study. I don't care. If I tried it and I didn't like it, didn't feel anything from it, I'm sorry. I can't get behind it. You know, this is the stuff I've used. Like I said, I was a big GHB guy. So when I created the Dream Chaser, I wanted to emulate the effects of the GHB. That's why I put the kava in there, which a lot of people are skeptical to use.
It's weird. Like the first, I don't know, like 10 minutes, I almost feel like my anxiety goes up a little bit.
That's from the GABA dropping. Okay, and then you get the GABA tingles, but then once the kava kicks in, you kind of get like that little euphoric feeling.
And then you're just out.
And then but 6 hours. I took it last night. You know, 6 hours, and you wake up and you're ready to take on the world. No hangover.
The biggest problem we had with the Phenibut products is we would tell guys, if you need to wake up, like, don't take this product.
You need an hour to wake up. It'll put you down.
Yeah.
But you're not getting up.
Yeah. If you can block out 10 hours of sleep, you're fine.
Sure.
But if you can't block that out, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah. But for guys that like that lifestyle, no days off, and, you know, and look, we're workers, dude. We're businessmen. You know, I have a family. You know, you're about to get married and probably start a family soon. You know, so you're gonna have an idea, you know, soon enough, what it's like. But sleep, you know, there's things I wish I could do for an extra hour of sleep a night, you know. But when I take, you know, my sleep product, they have that stuff in you, and the anti-anxiety components, which take the stress off the day, it's just a much, you know, more effective and better quality sleep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm right on board with you there. So if people that are watching this today want to follow you or your company, where would you suggest that they go?
They can go to Instagram. I have it's I_Prevail Subs, or they go to the Facebook page, or I have a website, www.iprevailsubs.com. I have all product information. All my formulas are on there. There's some testimonials. There's background stuff on me. There's videos on there. But I try to really push all the traffic to my brick and mortar stores. So if they go to my Instagram, they'll see stores that I constantly have on my stories or in my post that support the brand and are doing well with it. But they could find it there.
Okay, so you're mainly Instagram, no YouTube yet?
I have YouTube. You know, I'm a different generation guy, so I'm transitioning into that. You know, but I do have an I-Prevail Subs YouTube channel, which is the same videos that are there on the website. Yeah. But it's kind of, you know, you try to figure out where do you want to direct them. Yeah.
And guys, if you want to train like anything that Jason was talking about, if you download our free training app, he actually has a chess program on there.
Chess program, yeah.
And you can kind of get a gist for how Jason trains. So, thank you.